Happy Tuesday. I'm officially filming this at 12:14 at midnight. I just finished watching the Baylor-Arkansas game, and I think it's fair to say that I'm basketball out, but I'm still going to watch all the rest of the games because I feel like I have to when I want to, although I'm sick and tired of basketball. I'm done with basketball. I don't understand how the sport works in terms of fouls. There's things that I see some games that are fouls to other games that aren't, and it seems like always the team that you're rooting for, the team that you bet on, is always the team that isn't getting the fouls, and I'm done with basketball. So what else to do but talk some football here on Canadian Cock Talk, and we're continuing on the series of the position breakdown for each position for the South Carolina Gamecocks room. And this is the last offensive position I'm going to break down. We got wide receivers. I've done QBs already, done running backs, done O-linemen, and done tight ends. And this leads us to, I think it is clear to say that this is the weakest part of this Gamecocks offense. And that's no shot at any of these guys. Like, we got talent all across the board on this wide receiver, but compared to what we have at the other positions, I think it is fair to say, and it has shown over the last year, that this is the weakest spot for the Gamecocks. You never know what you have until it's gone, and I think that that statement is extremely true. I got one of the guys back there. You check this out. Mr. Debo Samuel, Brian Edwards, Shi Smith. You never know what you have until they're gone, and I knew what I had back then, but it didn't sting as much because every single year I knew that whoever was going in at quarterback was going to have some good pass catchers. Even going into last year, even though we lost Brian and Debo, Shi was still really, really good, and I loved having Shi on the team, but those three guys are all gone now. And you're kind of going back to the drawing board for the Gamecocks wide receiver room because there's not that one standout guy. I think that's the main key about all three of those guys. Those three guys were those number one wide receivers, or they could have been. And when you had all three of them on the same team, they could have all been guys that you never know when the ball's going to go to them because you just have three super talented guys on the field. Now, there's no cemented number one guy. There's no guy on third down or when you're in the red zone that you know that this ball is going to because you need him to show up big. And I think that's going to be something that the Gamecocks need to figure out this spring and heading into summer practice and fall practice, getting into that who is going to be your number one receiver. Although one positive, though, I'd say is if you are going to have a season where wide receiver is going to be your weakest position, I think this is guaranteed the season to have it when you have a very mobile and athletic quarterback plus the best running back tandem probably in the SEC, at least top three, and you have a good O-lineman. So if there's any season for the wide receivers to be figuring things out, I think it is definitely this season. But let's get into breaking down the wide receivers on this team, because you got some seniors this season who have been around the program for a long time. You got some sophomores, guys that we had last season, and then we have, I think, one freshman that is noteworthy because he is the second best recruit other than Colton Gauthier in this recruiting class. So let's start off with some of the seniors. We got Dak Joyner. We got Ortre Smith. We got Josh Van. And then transfer from Georgia Tech, Brown. And we also got, of course, Jalen Brooks. I think that's the core right there. You look at our main guys that we're going to have on this team. I think that's the core of your wide receivers room right now, those guys that I just named there, because they're the most experienced, they're the seniors. Now, I have no clue what Brown is going to be like. He could be the cemented number one guy right now. I need to see more of him in spring practice. I haven't seen enough to make a clarified judgment on him, but talking about some of the other guys, I want to start off with Ortre Smith, because Ortre, if you go back to 2017, the wide receiver room, Ortre wasn't a guy who was left out of the conversation for our best wide receivers. Like, I considered him in the quartet we had, if that's what you want to call it. Our top four guys, it was Debo, Brian, and then the Smith boys. You had Shi, and then you had Ortre. Ortre made some big catches. You go back to Louisiana Tech. Do you remember that game? Parker White finally makes a field goal, and the Gamecocks go on to win a nail-biter against Louisiana Tech. Ortre Smith makes an amazing catch, is able to stay up and get into the end zone. He was actually a really solid receiver for us last year. Now, over the last couple of years, I'm pretty sure he sat out last year due to COVID, but we haven't really seen him. If he can get back to that form that we saw him in his freshman year, I would not count out Ortre Smith as being the number one guy in this Gamecocks wide receiver room. Now let's talk about Dak Joyner, who Dak Joyner might be my favorite player on this team. He's super talented, he's super athletic, but I think I like him the most just because of his character and the fact that he is still with this program and working his butt off to constantly be doing what is best for this team. Like, you watch any of his interviews and he always says, or any of the coaches talk about him, and it's always, Dak Joyner just wants to help this team as best as he can. Remember, Dak came in as a quarterback. He came in as one of the top players in all of South Carolina, and he was third string for most of his career, and he got moved positions. This kid is still fighting for South Carolina, and that's why I love Dak Joyner. He's one of my favorite players by far. An athletic freak. We saw him sometimes last year. His hands need work. I think we all know that because he is a quarterback. He played quarterback in high school. His hands need work, but the athleticism is definitely there. You see, when he gets the ball in his hands, if we can work on getting Dak Joyner the ball in his hands with space, I think that's when you start to see really good things happening with the Gamecocks offense. That's when you start to get your bigger chunk plays, because you look at guys, speedsters. Let's take some of the guys that we had last season. Let's take Kadarius Toney on Florida. Just an athletic guy who's able to beat guys with his feet. And I think Dak Joyner's that guy. Obviously, Kadarius Toney has better hands right now than Dak Joyner does. But if Dak Joyner is able to work on his hand-eye coordination and just holding on to that football, we could have something special at the wide receiver position there. Jalen Brooks, going on to him, the hype was there when we brought him in, when we finally got him cleared from the NCAA, going into that LSU game. He didn't have the greatest start, but we definitely saw talent in spring, and that's why I think there was so much hype around him. We don't just get hyped up because of guys because they just got cleared. Like, this guy has shown things in practice. He has the hands. He has the agility. He has the vertical. If you've watched some of his practice highlights, this kid has the vertical to be something really special for this Gamecocks team. Josh Vann, another guy who's just been around this program, it seems like forever. Just another solid guy. I don't see Josh Vann right now becoming that number one wide receiver. I could be definitely wrong, though, but I think he plays a really, really good under role for a bunch of these guys. He's a really good and solid wide receiver, too, and I think that he's a guy that I'd love to see play a lot better and a lot more this season, especially when there's so many questions at that wide receiver position. Another guy that I don't know how slipped out of my memory when I was filming this, but I can't believe I forgot him, because he is honestly going to be one of the better wide receivers in this wide receiver room for sure. Xavier Legette, coming in this season, showed a lot of good signs in the freshman season. Again, if Legette, I think Ortre, Josh Vann, maybe. I think that Brown coming in from Georgia Tech. There's a bunch of guys that I think could be that cemented number one guy, and I think Xavier Legette definitely has that ability to become that guy. Again, if he shows that he can catch balls consistently and get into open space for Luke Doty. It's as simple as that. You look at some of the sophomores. I look at Mike Wyman. I look at Rico Powers, and then I look at Gary Caldwell. Those are my guys as my top sophomore wide receivers going into this season. Obviously, Rico Powers and Mike Wyman were the two top wide receivers in the class for the Gamecocks last season. They were very highly recruited, and bringing them in, they had a lot of hype around them. We didn't see them as much. I think we saw a lot more of Rico Powers on the field than we did Mike Wyman. But again, these are two really talented, highly recruited guys that we just didn't see as much last season. It could just be because they're freshmen. They got to get into things. It takes a while to get used to being in SEC ball games. But if we can get them more exposure and get them into games more, I think they have the potential to be the future of this Gamecocks wide receiver room. And last, moving on to another guy that I forgot about, EJ Jenkins, coming in with Jason Brown at quarterback from St. Francis. Another guy just adding to the wide receiver room. Again, I haven't seen too much tape on him yet to make a fair judgment, but we brought them into this program for a reason. And if he's able to perform and do well, happy to have him. Freshmen, our top freshman, our second best recruit under Colton Gauthier is obviously Sam Reynolds. I think those were like three of our top, we had like three players in the top 300 of 24/7's top 300 players. Sam Reynolds, he's a bit undersized, 5'9", but I think this kid can move. He's a fast kid. I'm excited to see where Sam Reynolds is. Like, you're at the top of the class for this Gamecocks recruiting class. Let's see what you can do. He might get some freshman touches this year. Expect to see a lot of him in games like later on in games when we go and face Troy, Eastern Illinois, those games. I just want to get these guys more touches. I want these guys to get more in-game experience, and I think that's what you really got to focus on in games like Eastern Illinois, in games like Troy. In our group of 5 games or FCS games, do not run the football. We know what we have in Marshawn Lloyd, and we know what we have in Kevin Harris. It's an easy call. Get the wide receivers experience. And if we could just get 2 guys to step up and show that they could be reliable targets for the Gamecocks, I think you're going to see this offense be put in a very successful position. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. That's the offense. Defense we will get into starting on Thursday. D linemen, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties, all that fun stuff, and then we'll get into special teams. So got lots more to talk about. Here on Canadian Cock Talk. But for now, thank you for tuning in, and definitely come back next time.